After watching the entire module, you'll be able to judge the suitability of laying a wooden floor using adhesive in a given room. You'll understand the acceptability criteria for the base and how to renovate the latter if necessary. Finally, you'll know how to choose, fit and treat a wooden floor in a professional manner. Hello. We're delighted to be able to help you with a job which is enjoyable but occasionally difficult, laying a solid wood floor using adhesive. We think a few explanations will be useful, considering that a wooden floor is a product which has a certain cost and a certain lifespan. Apart from the laying process itself, there is the floor to choose, with its own specific characteristics, the width and thickness of the boards, the finish, the quality of the wood, and so on. But there are also certain rules to be followed, concerning the laying direction, the starting point, and the connections with adjoining rooms. The aim of this module is to enable you to choose the right wooden floor and lay it in a professional manner, as well as to give you some advice on potential improvements to be made to the base. After laying, we'll tell you how to treat and maintain your wooden floor. Before we begin, bear in mind that most of the explanations we're going to provide here are equally relevant to the laying of non-solid wood floors or laminate flooring, whether glued or freely laid. The general procedures and tools are the same. Let's begin at the beginning. Before thinking about buying and laying a wooden floor, we need to establish if the place we wish to install it is actually suitable. Put simply, is it a good idea to lay a wooden floor at this time in a given place? The fact is, not all rooms are suitable for the installation of a wooden floor, or at least perhaps not at this moment. In fact, whether your home is newly built or otherwise, the rules are always the same. The air must be good, the base must meet certain criteria, and there must be no major obstacles to hinder the laying of a floor. Here we are on the first floor of a newly built house constructed just 1 year ago. The owner of the house is a physiotherapist, and this room is to be used for professional purposes. The large staircase descends to an entrance door reserved for patients, and the small one leads to the private part of the house. First of all, let's examine the premises and the general atmosphere. Is it unusually cold or damp? Are there problems with proofing between the inside and outside? Let's take a look. There are no traces of damp here. The walls are visibly dry. No traces of damp on the ceilings. No blisters in the paintwork. These careful checks are essential. Let's take a look at the frame. No traces of damp here either. I am currently on the first floor, so there's no need to worry about rising damp. At first glance, this room seems suitable for a wooden floor. Good. Let's move on to the next stage. Are there any obstacles which may get in our way during the laying process? Let's take a look around. As you can see, I'll be adding a certain thickness. Is this possible everywhere? And is it aesthetically pleasing? In the center of the room, there is obviously no problem. It is in places where my floor will connect with another surface that we have to take care. For example, in this room, the major obstacles are these two staircases. There is the landing step of the staircase which comes up from the ground floor. Provision has been made here for the wooden floor. The final stage has been left to the joiner. The same applies to this small staircase. It's placed on two small 15mm wedges, which I'll be able to slip under. Note that there are no radiators in this room. There are two auxiliary heaters and low-temperature underfloor heating. There's a door, but it's not affected by the laying of the floor. In a newly built house, if the doors are fitted before the floor covering, ask them to be fitted on wedges too, like this small staircase. Not only are the conditions right for laying my floor, but I also know that I can manage the obstacles which are present. Now let's take a look at the essential element, the base, the surface on which I'm going to lay my wooden floor. Our worst enemy is moisture in all its forms. In this recently built house, the screed was poured over a year ago. It's therefore had time to dry and is ready to receive a floor. If it was still moist, The adhesive would not stick to the screed, and even worse, the moisture would remain trapped and warp our wooden floor. There's a simple way to calculate the drying time required by your screed. When a screed has just been poured, multiply the thickness of the screed in centimeters by 2. The result is the drying time required in weeks. For example, if you just poured a screed of 8 centimeters, wait 16 weeks. There are, of course, objective methods for measuring the dampness of the base. The level of dampness must be 2% maximum, and the device which enables us to measure this accurately is called a carbide bomb. The carbide bomb is a device which provides a chemical analysis of a piece of your screed. You won't find this device everywhere. It's only used by professionals. You may be able to ask a hire store to get hold of one for you. This is a very useful instrument and easy to operate. A word of advice: don't trust those little electronic testers which are mostly intended for testing plaster. Watch out for some of the most common tips too. Some people recommend, for example, sprinkling salt on the screed and observing whether or not it remains dry. Another word of advice: to reduce the drying time required for a screed, in the case of a newly built property, you can use special kinds of quick-drying cement. Products are now available which will allow you to have an 8-centimeter screed which will be dry in 3 days. That's all well and good, but if your house is new, take care regarding the drying time required for the building and the walls. If in doubt, there's one simple rule: wait. On the other hand, if your screed covers embedded heating, as is the case here, the time required will be shorter. Having said that, perhaps your base is not a screed but wooden chipboards, in which case you can simply check the general dampness of the building. Generally speaking, in a newly built house or extension, the problem of damp is quite easy to deal with. Renovations are another matter. Imagine a house built several decades ago. The floor is covered with tiling. You don't like this flooring and you'd like to cover it with a solid wood floor. Okay, if all the conditions are right, you could glue it on top. You just need to choose the right kind of adhesive. We'll come back to this. But is this base suitable? How was this tiling laid back then? Considering the year of construction of this small farmhouse, it was undoubtedly laid on a bed of sand or ballast, and there's no cellar. In other words, there's no barrier against the potential emergence of rising damp. You could take the risk of going ahead with the laying process, but allow me to offer you some advice nonetheless. It's always best to avoid complications before they arise. Since you don't like the tiling, remove it. Take away the sand on which it has most probably been laid and replace it with a suitable, properly insulated base, a concrete slab and a finishing screed. If you don't want to carry out this kind of work, anti-damp barriers are available, often as a 2-part product, which you spread with a roller over your old tiling. But take care when using this solution, as it's not always adequate. That's not a problem here. Let's take a look at the flatness criteria. Flatness is being used here in the sense of fully flat without any undulations. Take this screed, for example. It must meet precise criteria. Under a 2-meter lath, there must be no spaces of more than 3 millimeters. As you can see under the lath, there's practically no space. If you have spaces of more than 3 millimeters, you will either have to accept small undulations in the base, which will result in slightly less effective adhesion and imperfect flatness, or you can rectify this by pouring a leveling compound. Leveling compound is a ready-to-use cement, which is simply mixed with water. It can be used in a very fine thickness of 1 to 10 millimeters. There are leveling compounds for all kinds of bases, including wooden boards or old flooring. Take care regarding its conditions of use. Do not use a leveling compound on poorly attached or non-flush boards. The whole thing will bleed through or may not hold. If the boards or old flooring vibrates, the leveling compound will come unstuck. Consider taking photos and describe the situation to your hardware dealer. And don't forget, the adhesive you use can never serve to make up for uneven areas. Its thickness is negligible. Now, let's check the solidity of the base. This is very important. Here the base holds firm, so there's no need to worry. A significant release of dust indicates that there's a problem to be resolved. The situation can be improved by using a fixative which will harden the surface of the screed. Elsewhere, in an attic for example, you'll need to check that the boards are securely attached. In an old house, that the tiling is not coming loose, etc. All such problems must be dealt with before the floor is laid. And finally, we come to the cleanliness of the base. Your solid wood floor is going to be glued, and the adhesive must stick correctly to the base. This means no dust, no grease, etc. Let's take a concrete example. Old tiling over which you wish to lay a wooden floor. No rising damp or residual humidity? Great. But your tiling has been cleaned with soap for decades and it remains greasy. Degrease it by wiping it with acetone, for example. You may need to scratch it if the tiling is too smooth. You can use a single brush sander to do this. We'll look at this shortly and, of course, carefully vacuum up the dust. Okay, so let's summarize this section. The general atmosphere must be right. In other words, sufficiently dry and warm. Do not lay flooring in a temperature of under 10 degrees, if only for the sake of the adhesive. Any obstacles must be manageable. Watch out, for example, for doors which often open into the room, which will have to be removed or recut before the floor is laid. Caution! Glass doors cannot be recut. The base must be dry, as must be the entire building. Flat. Flat is used here in the sense of without undulation. Solid, so that the lifespan of your wooden floor is not dependent on an unsuitable base. And clean, so that the adhesive will stick to the base, no grease, wax, polish, residue, etc. And of course our tip of the day. Do not expect the wooden floor or the adhesive to rectify an incorrect existing situation. In most cases, the conditions are right. We don't want to be pessimistic, but it's always best to identify any problems before beginning. In our own case, the conditions have all been met. So, now let's go and choose our floor. Here we are at a wooden floor supplier's, where we'll be able to find everything we need for the laying process. The floor itself, of course, as well as the skirting boards, the adhesive, and so on. Oak flooring is the most popular kind in our part of the world, so we've given it pride of place in this module. It can be found very easily at a large number of sales outlets. In principle, everything we're going to teach you here is equally applicable not just to other wood types, but also to semi-solid wood flooring. Oh, what's that you say? No need to panic. Semi-solid wood flooring is simply flooring where only the upper 3 or 4 millimeters are made of high-quality wood, of genuine solid wood. And the rest, the base we might say, is of variable composition, chipboard, MDF or something similar. In particular, this enables the use of a smaller quantity of high-quality wood, and I just happen to have some with me. You can see the layer of high-quality wood, 3 to 4 millimeters. In a room for private use, this is perfectly adequate. In a room for intensive use, solid is definitely better. Note in passing that this wooden flooring has already been treated, as even solid wood flooring sometimes is. A factory-ready finish can have its advantages, meaning you don't have to do this work yourself. But I would only recommend this option when you're working on an easy room. Because with pre-treated wood flooring, you'll not be able to retouch it, or at least not very easily. There's always a chance you might scratch it during the laying process. Let's take a board at random. It might not look anything special at first glance, but let's take a closer look. You can see that these boards are fitted with an interlocking system along their entire perimeter. These are referred to as groove and tongue. Their purpose is to keep the boards flush. Can you see? This is useful because it means you won't have to sand the floor after laying. And it gives the whole thing a nice appearance. In fact, that's why we've chosen to show you this kind of wooden floor. The advantage of this interlocking system makes it very popular, and it's easy to find. Make sure this interlocking system is present on all 4 sides, the 2 large sides and the 2 small ones. This is not always the case. After the interlocking system comes what is known as the class of the wood, in other words, visible defects. Visible defects refer to all aspects which make a board imperfect. Knots, for example. They are average and healthy in this case. The fewer of these defects you can see, the more you'll pay for the wood. We refer to class to describe the visible quality of a wooden floor. First class, no defects. Second class, small knots of 10 millimeters maximum, etc. The presence of these knots does not reduce the intrinsic sturdiness of your floor. If you like them, they're not a problem. However, you should avoid any defects which are not due to the tree but result from the process of fashioning or drying the wood. Boards which are cracked, badly planed, warped, etc. Normally, the reputation of your supplier will allow you to avoid this kind of problem. Generally speaking, a floor which is to be glued has a thickness of 15 millimeters, give or take 1 or 2 millimeters. You'll never wear out wood of that thickness, but it's necessary to house the interlocking system we referred to a minute ago. The layer you could in theory wear out is the part above the groove. Take a look. In this case it's 4 millimeters. Perfectly sufficient when we consider that during a renovation, with full sanding of the floor, a job which might be carried out every 20 or 30 years, approximately 1 millimeter of material will be removed. And on the subject of thickness, bear in mind that thicker floors are available, 20 to 21 or 22 millimeters. These are normally only used for laying on stays or beams. They're thicker simply so that they do not bend when you walk between two beams. However, you can glue a floor of this thickness, modern adhesives being sufficiently strong, but this degree of thickness is not necessary. Fourth parameter, width. There is a fashion for large widths, and yes, it looks good. But technically, is it really a good idea? We have to remember that wood is alive, so to speak. This means that the fibers are still active. They swell slightly when the ambient humidity increases and retract when it decreases. This is why it's said that a floor moves at times. We therefore need to leave an expansion joint all around our wooden floor. However, under very dry conditions, if the board is wide, the contraction will be noticeable. Yes, this will only take place under extreme conditions which are unlikely to occur in your home. But keep this tip in mind, avoiding exceeding a ratio of 1 to 10 between thickness and width. For flooring of 15 millimeters, a board of 15 centimeters width is an excellent choice. Another possibility is to opt for a combination of different widths, the narrower boards preventing the wider boards from warping. Aesthetically, this provides a certain subtlety. See if you can obtain this from your supplier. Concerning the length of the boards, there's nothing too important to say. Lengths generally vary. The boards are cut during production of the flooring simply because the presence of an excessive defect requires this to be done. This is why, if you like large lengths, it'll be easier to find them in a rustic style. If it's first class, it may well be expensive. Indeed, this may be a good reason to think about using semi-solid wood flooring, which we mentioned earlier. Less wood, therefore less expensive too. Another characteristic concerns the little bevel that you can see on the edge of the board. When two boards are interlocked, a small V is formed. This is called a chamfer. So, what is a chamfer for? Well, it has two purposes. The first is to accustom your eye to this line between each row of boards. Can you see the line which is darker? If your floor opens up a little, if the boards move apart, you won't notice, or barely, because you're used to this virtual space between the boards. Also, any slight undulations are less easy to feel, and this means you don't have to sand the floor after laying. Have a look at this. Is that clear? If the floor had no chamfers, and it moved a little, you could see it and feel it much more quickly, like this. In fact, chamfers mask, both to the eye and the touch, any little movements which may occur. Let me end this section by turning over the board. What do you see? Lines, thin grooves. And what is the purpose of these thin grooves? Well, first of all, to guide the boards through various machines, planers, sanders, etc. Their secondary advantage is that they reduce the sensitivity of the wood, especially with large widths. Let's summarize. Here are the different characteristics of a wooden floor, made of oak or another type of wood, which you should take into account when buying. The characteristics of wooden floor elements. Interlocking. Interlocking refers to the presence of a groove and a tongue, ideally on all edges of the board. This is a technical requirement if good results are to be achieved. The class. The class is the visible quality of the wooden floor. with or without knots, small or large defects, etc. The fewer defects, the more expensive the flooring. Bear in mind that precise designations exist, but they're not always used or respected. Thickness. The thickness of a solid wood floor varies between 14 and 16 millimeters, but there is nothing to prevent you from going further. This will depend on the floor covering you have in your other rooms, with which your wood floor should ideally correspond. Width. Remember, I suggest that you should adhere to a ratio of 1 to 10 between the thickness and width for reasons of stability. Length. Lengths are generally variable. The chamfer. This is the bevel on the edge of the board, generally reserved for larger sides. Chamfers mask small movements in the wooden floor. Small grooves. Situated on the rear side of the element, these are used to guide the boards during fashioning. The finish. Finished or untreated. Most often, you'll find untreated wooden floors to be treated after laying. Since these solid wood floors always have to be glued, and since there may be small overspills of adhesive, this is no bad thing. They are, however, generally well sanded. Ensure that this is the case, as this will help you avoid quite a lot of work and the hire of a few tools. Solid or semi-solid. Bear in mind that everything we've said, and are going to say, also applies to semi-solid wood floors. Okay, we're not finished yet. It's time to place my order. Let's do this together, based on a plan of the room. So here's the room to be floored. 5 meters wide, 7 meters long, that's 35 square meters. If I subtract the main stairwell, or 3.5 square meters, I'm left with 31.5 square meters to cover. Concerning the skirting boards, I'm of course going to order them now, but I'll explain the procedure to you a little later. To cover my 31.5 square meters, I need to order a little more, 7 to 8% extra. That's to say 33.7 square meters approximately. For the adhesive, I'm buying the latest kind, a ready-to-use MS polymer adhesive. It's solvent-free and single component. This means I don't have to mix it with another product, and I can simply close up the pot when I want to lay. At a rate of 1.3 kilos per square meter, I need 41 kilos. As it comes in 16 kilo pots, I'm ordering 3 of them. Now, that's a good question. In what direction should I lay my floor? In fact, there are no really strict rules. It's up to your own taste and wishes. There is, however, one technical aspect which must not be ignored, and that's the way in which a wooden floor expands, especially a solid wood floor. If it moves a little, it'll probably do so in the direction of the diameter of the fibers. The boards will therefore widen to some extent, but lengthen very little. What does this mean? If your room is quite large and more or less rectangular, it'll be best to lay the boards lengthwise. So, in this room, which measures 5 by 7 meters, I would lay them in this direction. In this way, the expansion will only occur over 5 meters. Here it's not important since the room is not particularly large, but in a large corridor, on the other hand, this can certainly have an effect. Now that I know my laying direction, I can decide where to begin. Of course, you'll want to begin against a wall, as that will be easier, but watch out for the irregular layout, which is quite typical of older buildings. Never forget that the true criteria is not the wall, it's how things look to you, the feeling you get when you enter the room. Whatever direction you opt for, this feeling has to be right. Have a look at this. Here's a square room. A single door opens into this room. You can choose whatever laying direction you prefer. From a technical point of view, it makes little difference. But remember this. If you want the wooden floor to be perpendicular to your line of vision when you enter the room, lay it truly perpendicularly to your line of vision. To achieve this, and this applies particularly to old buildings, don't place too much trust in the walls. Take a look. Is your square room really square? If you take the far wall as a starting point, imagine what will have happened by the time you arrive at the door. So now you understand that using a wall as the basis for starting your wooden floor is not always a good idea. What counts is the impression when you enter the room. So, What should you do? To avoid this risk, carry out a test. Set down 3 or 4 rows of boards without gluing them in such a way as to produce a good effect when you're on the threshold of the room. Once this is the case, and only then, take measurements to see if you can use the wall as a good basis. If the left and right measurements are not identical, draw a line in front of the wall which respects the measurements and use this line as your starting point. When you've finished, you'll fill in the remaining triangle with pieces of board recut accordingly. This is much better than a wooden floor which doesn't feel right. Of course, what we've just said applies equally if you wish to lay your wooden floor in the other direction, i.e., truly parallel to your line of vision when you're on the threshold of the room. And in this room, how will I determine the starting point? The house is new. The walls are well laid out. The room truly rectangular. The problem lies elsewhere. These 2 staircases, which are in the way. If I use the left wall or the right wall as a basis, I run the risk of problems making the right cuts close to these staircases. Small pieces, difficult to cut right. So, I'm going to begin at the landing stair and take advantage of the clear space to do some good work. Here's a short animation to help you understand what I mean. Here's our room, seen as a plan. I identify the middles of the 2 widths and draw a line across the room. Note that this line is truly perpendicular to my line of vision when I come up the large staircase, and truly parallel when I leave the private part of the house. I'm now going to move this line back next to the large staircase. It's this line which will serve as my starting point, and I'll fill my room towards the left. I'm therefore going to store 2/3 of my wooden flooring close to the left wall and 1/3 close to the right wall. Okay, here are the essential tools. A meter stick, a pencil, a set square, a large straight edge, a hammer, a small plane, and a chalk line. We'll see if we need anything else as we go along. Now for the machines. They're not absolutely essential, but they certainly make things easier and faster. So here's a radial arm saw, also known as a miter saw. This is the machine that you'll use constantly. This one has a blade of 30 centimeters diameter with 80 teeth. You can set it on a small table or a portable workbench. This is how you use it. I put my board in place and maintain it with one hand, while I work the trigger with the other hand. Note the protective shield which comes up when I bring down the blade. This is a very simple machine which you'll find easily for hire. Unfortunately, it's not sufficient for all our needs, since it can only make simple straight cuts, although the direction of the cut can be changed. An interesting aspect is that many models offer the option of pulling away the engine block and cutting larger pieces. For smaller cuts, you'll also need a jigsaw. With this, you'll be able to make more specific and delicate cuts, even round cuts if you use the right kind of blade. So, those are the tools. Now, let's get started. Here's my line of reference. It connects the center of the two small walls. I'm going to start from the staircase, staying parallel to my line of reference. When the first line of flooring has been drawn, the rest will be much easier. Let's do the cuts, and we'll apply the adhesive afterwards. Here we are. Without the adhesive and the other boards in our way, it's much easier. Take a look at the work. Note that the boards are not touching anything. There's an expansion joint between them and the obstacle represented by the main stairway. However, the board fits in above the small stairway. You'll also notice that the tongue is facing you. Why? Because you may well have to insist and use a hammer if some of the boards don't interlink easily. And in that case, it's better to hammer against the tongue. It serves to protect the board. Never hammer directly, though. Use a tapping block to protect the tongue. Right, one more little piece and my first row is finished. To cut the required piece, I move my board until I have the length I require. However, I draw an indicator a few millimeters before the join with the other board for expansion. And I'll use the remaining piece to begin the next line. Now I'm going to draw a line with the pencil in front of my 3 rows and then release them. This is where I'm going to place the adhesive. The surface area is approximately 3.5 square meters. At a rate of 1.3 kilos per square meter, I'll need to use 4.5 kilos. This is something you become familiar with. So, let's do it. Since I'm right-handed, I spread the adhesive to the right of the room. Note how I hold the spatula at a 45-degree angle, with the fingers on top and the thumb below. Try not to go over the pencil line. Now let's lay the pre-cut boards. We have half an hour to do this before the glue begins to set. Note that the boards are laid quite close to each other before being interlinked. The boards are pressed in order to encourage good adhesion. Let's check one last time that the beginning of my flooring is still fully rectilinear with my line of vision, that it still feels right. Having arrived at this stage, you have 2 options. You can keep going, wedging the rows already laid down, or wait until tomorrow until the adhesive has dried. The advantage is that you'll then have a good basis to work from, the first 3 rows. In our case, we're going to continue. We still have a large part of the floor to install. We're going to lay down part of it behind our 3 rows to wedge them, and with the rest we're going to try to finish the first half. See you tomorrow. Good morning. Did you sleep well? Great. Here we are at our floor with a good half of it laid. Let's take a quick look at it together. A few things should be mentioned. You can see that we've left an expansion joint in all places. There is no staircase effect. One joint here, another there, like a staircase. Nor are they aligned. You'll also see that we have fitted wedges between the final board and the wall, so that the rows remain suitably tight while the adhesive dries. There are still a few lines to be drawn. In a moment we'll discuss an important little detail. We're going to work backwards, that's to say with the groove towards the wall. Take care if you need to hammer against the planks. Do this gently and always use a block. Let's do the first board of the last row together. As you can see, the principle remains the same. We turn the board in the width direction. I place the board on its back, tongue against the wall to trace what is missing. For these final pieces, I suggest that you place the adhesive directly on the back of the pieces, rather than on the screen. This will allow you to finish calmly without stress. When everything is in place, check carefully that the boards have not come apart, as this can happen during the work. Retighten them, placing small wedges to the right and left if necessary, and leave the adhesive to set and dry. See you tomorrow. Hello, here we are again with our beautiful floor. A few final touches and it'll be all yours. We're going to carry out this work chronologically, because there is a certain logic to be respected. First of all, fill in the holes. These may take the form of a knot or a small split. Nothing serious, but if you don't like them, we can use some wood paste. Choose light oak tone for our purposes. You can work with a tube and a spatula, although the paste also comes in pots if you need a lot of it. But in our case, the wood is high class and there are hardly any defects. Now, what should you do with expansion joints which are not hidden by a skirting board or quarter round? The joint I've left between the flooring and the stairway, for example. There's no question of filling it with a hard material like my wood paste, but you can fill it with soft plaster, a kind of silicone, an acrylic sealant in fact. This substance is sold in cartridges, so you'll need to have a silicone gun. Ideally, you should protect the edges with masking tape, fill and then smooth. Close sanding now, particularly where you've just applied wood paste, as well as any small traces of adhesive, shoe marks, etc. In short, your floor must be clean before it's treated. Once you've made your corrections, run the vacuum cleaner over it all. Now for the first coat, finally, before the skirting boards. Yes, and why? Because this gives you a chance to coat the whole surface right up to the walls. If your flooring contracts just a little bit in the coming months, there'll be no color difference. Take a look at this. If the air in your room is too dry, this will affect your flooring. It won't expand, it will retract by a few tenths of a millimeter. This is enough, however, to create a fine, clear line in front of the skirting boards. But if you've applied an initial layer before fitting these skirting boards, you won't have a problem. Let's talk a little about these finishing products. Nowadays, two main types are available, oils and varnishes. Let's not get into a debate over them, which could last several hours. You'll find as many different opinions as different products. Our advice is to always choose quality products. They may be quite expensive, but they're worth it. Try to see samples produced with the products recommended to you. Choose the finish you prefer, matte, satin, or glossy. Finally, find out how the chosen product is to be maintained, and remember above all that there is no product on the market which does not require maintenance. It simply doesn't exist. For our purposes, we've chosen an oil which is subtler than a varnish. Oil is a product which impregnates the wood, whereas varnish simply covers it. It's being applied here with a roller. Note that the job is made easier by the absence of skirting boards. I'm able to work faster. I'm now going to leave this coat to dry for 2 hours. This is a quick drying product because it's waterborne. In other words, the particles are dispersed in water rather than in a solvent. Better for the health. As you've now seen, several stages are required to lay a floor, and it's done over several days. This is our last day, fitting accessories and applying the final coat of oil. You should remember that you're walking on a floor which already has been partially treated, so you need to wear light, clean shoes. Don't panic if you make a little scratch. You will in any case need to perform a light sanding before applying the final coat. So let's fit the accessories. Here's a sample of the skirting board, which is of standard type and made of solid oak. For reference, skirting boards serve two purposes. Firstly, to mask the expansion joint, and secondly, to prevent you knocking against the wall every time you use a vacuum cleaner or brush. They're not very high, 7 centimeters. They're easy to work with and to cut. They're beveled at the tip to make them easier to plane. If you have a slight bump on your surface, you can alter the bottom of the skirting board so that it's a close fit with your flooring. The aim is to equip all the walls around which you've laid flooring, making the most elegant connections possible between the different pieces. It is, of course, in the corners that this will be the most difficult. This is where your radial arm saw becomes really handy. It offers you the option of guiding the cut. Here's a little model we made, which represents the corner of a room. Let's see how to fit them. The aim, when you have a re-entrant angle, as we have here, is to have a nice complementary join. This is not always easy. How do we do it? With a 90-degree angle, i.e. a right angle, we have to position the plate of the machine at 45 degrees to the left. Then place the skirting board the right way up and with the good side facing you. What I'm saying here applies to right-handers. Left-handers will do it exactly the other way around. So, I've just cut the skirting board which goes to the left of the re-entrant angle. For the piece which will go to the right, the same applies, except that you cut the skirting board after having placed it upside down, again with the good side facing you. And there are my two entirely complementary cuts. I'll place them into my model. With the corner angle, you do things in reverse. For the left side, you cut the skirting board with the good side towards the saw and upside down. For the right side, good side towards the saw and right way up. These fine cuts are not always easy to get right, at least on first attempt. A good tip is to do these angle cuts first before cutting the skirting boards to measure. This will allow you to correct the angle if it's not done right. You'll soon understand what I mean. Take a look at the dimensions of the walls to be covered. A 6.7 square meter wall, a 5.4 square meter wall, a 5 square meter wall, and a 2 square meter wall. This gives a total of 19.1 square meters. Try not to fit small pieces of skirting board. Consider buying 15 to 20% extra. To cover the walls of this room, we've bought 8 skirting boards of 3 meters. The idea is to fit several pieces on each wall, but of identical length, like this. 3 pieces of 2 meters 23 centimeters on the large wall, 2 pieces of 2.7 meters on the back wall, and 2 pieces of 2.5 meters on the right. Now observe the method used to fit the skirting boards. The idea is to make it as easy as possible to achieve the most elegant angles. Something that's very important. I'm going to start by fitting out the corners. The left corner first. I have, of course, cut the 2 pieces at the required angle, that's to say 45 degrees. But I'm not fitting these 2 pieces. In any case, they're not the right length. I'm ensuring the quality of my corner. If I need to make a correction, no problem. My skirting boards are long enough. If the angle suits me, I'll then cut the skirting boards to measure and fit them. Then I start again with the other corner. The aim is to check the quality of the angles before cutting the pieces to measure. This will allow you to alter the angles if you're not satisfied with the result. As far as possible, depending on the dimensions of your room and the length of the skirting boards you have been able to find, always try to equip the angles before filling in the space between these skirting boards. You'll find skirting boards ranging from 2 meters to 3.5 meters at any good supplier. To attach these skirting boards, use a cartridge of mounting adhesive which fits into the same silicone gun we used earlier. While waiting for it to set, place weights behind the pieces of skirting board or nails, which can either be fully hammered or left sticking out to be withdrawn once the adhesive is set. A small lath or quarter round, etc. will do the same thing. And by way of example, next to the staircase we're going to use a small lath called a beading profile. It's now time to apply my final coats on the skirting boards and on the flooring. 2 coats on the skirting boards and 3 on the flooring. This depends on the product. Don't forget to read the instructions. To achieve a good end result, always consider very lightly sanding the surface of your floor before the final coat. This is called smoothing. You can do it by hand, with very light sandpaper folded in 4, or using a single brush sander, fitted with a nylon pad. Here's one. If you hire this machine, which I recommend that you do, for a surface area greater than 30 square meters, ask them to show you how to use it. And that's it, our wooden floor is finished. You should wait 4 to 5 days before bringing the furniture back in, because although the substance may be dry, it hasn't yet completely solidified. Place protective covers over everything that may move: chairs, armchairs, tables. Be careful with chairs on wheels, which can be highly abrasive when even just slightly dirty. Never clean a wooden floor with excessive amounts of water, but do clean it regularly. The products that we've mentioned, the oils and varnishes, are waterproof. You can wipe them with a moist floor cloth or a towel without any risk. Add a little mild non-detergent soap to the water. Every year, or more often if the room is used a lot, apply a pure undiluted product all over. This will replace what you've used as your main product. Ideally, you should use maintenance products of the same brand as the product used when the floor was laid. If you follow these few pieces of advice, your children and grandchildren will also experience the pleasure of walking on this very fine wooden floor. Don't forget, you can visit our website and download files related to specific points, such as finishing, tools, wood types, and much, much more. Thank you for watching, and see you again soon on Didactic TV.